The echoing walls. They say the walls remember everything. That's what Daniel whispered into his camera as he stepped through the rusted metal gate of Eastern State Penitentiary. The once mighty stone fortress loomed in silence, abandoned and forgotten, save for the whispers to those eerie, chilling sounds that had lured him here. He'd waited until midnight, long after the last of the official ghost tours had ended. Hiding nearby, he slipped in through a loose service panel in the back wall, his flashlight casting a thin beam across decaying bricks and moss-covered stone. Daniel was no stranger to abandoned places. He'd explored forgotten asylums, collapsing theaters, even an old shipyard where workers swore they saw figures walking between the cranes. But Eastern State, this place was different. It wasn't just the history, it was the weight of the silence. Thick, heavy, alive. His footsteps echoed sharply down the corridor, bouncing off cracked tiles and iron bars. The air was damp and cold, unnaturally so for a summer night. Every cell block felt like a throat about to speak. He flicked the flashlight across the cell numbers block to cell 15, cell 16, and paused. There it was again. A whisper, barely audible, like someone muttering under their breath. He froze. Here, he swung the light toward the sound. Empty hallway, dust hanging in the air like fog. He turned his camera to record. Midnight, Eastern State. I'm standing in block 2. Heard whispering, maybe just my head, or maybe not. As he walked further in, he passed rusting metal doors, each one a former prison cell. Most were open now, gaping like broken mouths. Inside, steel bed frames, peeling paint, and silence. Yet each doorway seemed to watch him pass, judging, remembering. Daniel stopped at one cell with the number partially scraped away. The door hung loosely, as if someone or something had pried it open from the inside. His flashlight swept the walls. There were scratches, not graffiti, not artwork, just frantic, desperate lines gouged into the stone, layer upon layer like the walls had bled. And above the tiny bed frame was a word, carved deep. Listen. He shivered. Okay, that's not creepy at all, he mumbled, trying to laugh, but his voice felt too loud, too out of place. Suddenly, a metallic clang echoed from somewhere deeper in the prison. A heavy sound like a door slamming shut. Daniel turned quickly. Hello? Nothing, just the echo. He moved faster now, heart pounding, deeper into the penitentiary's belly, down a winding corridor, past the crumbling central rotunda where guards once watched every block. A single broken skylight let in moonlight, casting long shadows. Then another whisper, this time closer. Double quotes. Leave. It wasn't just a sound, it was a voice, old, dry, like parchment tearing. Daniel spun in a circle, the flashlight jerking. No one there. He ducked into another cell to calm his nerves, took deep breaths, let the camera run. Then his flashlight flickered. Once, twice, went out. Darkness swallowed him. He froze. This wasn't battery failure. It was something else. He smacked the flashlight. Nothing. Then his camera screen lit up, still recording. But something had changed. On screen, through the lens, he saw a faint outline of a man at the end of the hallway. Tall, slouched, in a tattered prison uniform. Daniel blinked and looked up from the screen. Nothing there. He looked back at the screen. The figure remained, motionless, watching. He stepped back, slowly. The cell behind him felt like a cage. Then, on the camera, the figure took a step forward, and another, but still nothing visible to the naked eye. Daniel's breath caught. He backed out of the cell, not daring to speak. His boots scraped against broken tiles. The figure in the screen moved closer. 10 feet away now. Stop, Daniel whispered. The screen glitched for a moment, and then the figure vanished. Just gone. He stood there in the hallway, panting, surrounded by empty cells and a silence that now felt charged, as if the whole building had noticed him. His flashlight sparked back to life suddenly. It startled him, but he was grateful. He aimed it down the corridor where the figure had been. There was no one there, but on the wall, fresh as if written in condensation, was a message. "Don't come looking." His blood ran cold. This was no ordinary haunting. Someone or something was warning him, telling him to leave. But Daniel was too deep now. Curiosity burned hotter than fear. He pressed on. He found Block 7 sealed off to tourists. Signs read danger, collapse risk. But the gate had been cut recently. He slipped inside. The air here was heavier, thick with mold and dust. His light caught flickersty reflections, like eyes. Then another sound. Breathing. But it wasn't his. Ragged, labored, coming from the next cell over. He crept toward it, camera rolling, light shaking. The breathing got louder, more frantic. Then it stopped. He reached the door, swung the beam of light inside. Nothing. Empty room. But on the wall, a bloody handprint. Fresh. His hands trembled. He turned around to leave and found the hallway behind him completely dark. All sound disappeared. No breathing. No echo. Just silence. Utter silence. He walked quickly and ran. Back the way he came. Through the crumbling blocks, the collapsed doors, the scratch marks. He ran until he hit the central rotunda again. Light from the moon spilling in like liquid silver. But there on the floor was his flashlight. The same one he was still holding in his hand. He stared in disbelief. What? He picked it up. It was cold, icy, and the label scratched on the side, DL Urban X's initials, his marking. He now had to. That was impossible. He turned around and saw himself standing in the rotunda. Not a mirror, not a reflection. Another him, same clothes, same bag, same stunned expression. But this version's face looked wrong, hollow, eyes black. The second Daniel lifted his hand and pointed at him. "You're not supposed to be here," the double said, voice flat and lifeless. Daniel dropped the second flashlight and bolted. He didn't look back, not even when he heard the footsteps behind him. Chasing. He made it to the breach in the back wall and burst through into the open air. Cold night air hit his lungs like fire. He didn't stop running until he was on the other side of the street. Breathless, shaking. The prison stood silent, still, watching. Daniel clutched the camera to his chest, still recording. The screen flickered once, then showed a message, white text on black. "You left, but you're still inside." He didn't sleep that night. Back at his motel, Daniel played the footage over and over. Some parts were missing, glitched. Others showed things he didn't remember seeing. The whisper in Block 2. It wasn't a whisper on the recording. It was a voice, clear and deliberate. "I remember you." The scratch word "listen" was gone on video. The wall clean. The figure in the hallway, not visible at all. Only the sound of steps. And the second flashlight, nowhere to be found. In the footage, it looked like Daniel had only ever carried one. But when he unpacked his bag, 2 identical flashlights, the second was still cold. The next morning, he drove out of Philadelphia. But something followed him. Not a shadow, not a ghost. Something worse. His camera, even when turned off, flickered on randomly. Once, while stopping at a gas station, he caught his reflection in the window. But his reflection didn't move the same way. Didn't blink. Didn't look away. The man in cell 12. 3 days had passed since Daniel escaped Eastern State Penitentiary. He hadn't slept. Not really. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that other version of himself, cold, expressionless, and staring. The footage from his camera was glitchy, segments looped. Some audio was distorted, reversed, or missing. The last frame, before he ran one, where the second flashlight appeared, flickered now with new text he hadn't seen before. "He's still there." Those words haunted him. He needed answers. And so, on the fourth morning, Daniel drove back to Philadelphia, not to sneak into the prison again, but to visit a man who might know more, Raymond Keener, a retired local historian who had written 2 books on Eastern State and gave lectures on its dark past. Raymond agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near Fairmount Avenue. The man was thin, weary, with heavy eyes and a voice that dragged like it had witnessed too much. "You saw something in there, didn't you?" Raymond asked as soon as they sat down. Daniel nodded. "I don't know what exactly. Something wrong. It wasn't just an echo or a trick of the light." Raymond stirred his coffee. "Let me guess. Cold air, whispers. A shadow that doesn't belong to anyone. Am I close?" Daniel's hands tightened around his mug. "Too close." Raymond gave a grim smile. "Cell 12? Daniel blinked. "How did you—" "You're not the first," Raymond said, "and you won't be the last." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You know the prison was built to reform inmates through solitude? 1 man, 1 cell, no talking, no contact, just silence. But cell 12 was different." Daniel clicked his recorder on. "Tell me everything." Raymond took a deep breath and began. "Back in 1933, a man named Emmett Calloway was sentenced to life. Triple homicide. Cold-blooded, they said. But when he arrived at Eastern State, he didn't resist, didn't talk, not even at trial. They put him in cell 12, in block 3, routine at first. But after a few months, guards noticed strange things. At first, it was just the cold. Cell 12 was colder than the rest, even in the heat of July. They checked the vents, nothing wrong. Then the noise started. The guards heard whispering, but only near his cell. When they opened the door to investigate anything, Emmett would be standing there, staring at the wall, silent, still. One day, he vanished. Literally vanished. His cell was locked from the outside. No damage, no tunnel, no broken bars, just gone. Some thought he escaped, but the warden was furious. He ordered a full search. 20 men swept every inch. Nothing. No blood. No clothes. No Emmett. They reopened the cell months later, put another inmate in, a pickpocket named Lenny. 2 days later, gone too. Same story, locked from outside. After that, they sealed cell 12 permanently. Daniel stared at Raymond, stunned. "And that's not in any tour guide." "Of course not," Raymond said. "They don't want people poking around there." "Have you seen it?" "Once," Raymond said. "Years ago, as part of a preservation effort. We were cataloging the older blocks. I stepped into cell 12, and it felt like I walked into a freezer. My breath fogged up immediately. The light wouldn't stay on. My colleague fainted. We never finished the inventory." Daniel's voice was low. "I think I saw something in the camera. A man, but not alive." Raymond nodded solemnly. "People say Emmett didn't just vanish. They believe his soul was absorbed into the prison. That cell 12 feeds on the living. A gateway. Or a cage." Daniel frowned. "A cage for what?" Raymond's eyes darkened. "Something that wants to get out." That night, Daniel watched the footage again, frame by frame. He isolated the part where he passed block 3, froze on the moment his camera swept past the door marked 12. For a split second, in the frame, barely visible was a pale face in the darkness, eyes hollow, mouth open, as if screaming silently. He enhanced the image, pushed the brightness. They're on the wall behind the figure scratched into the bricks. "I never left." Daniel jolted back. He didn't remember seeing that in real life. He stared at the image for a long time, then reached for his phone. He had to go back. 2 nights later, Daniel returned, this time with 2 cameras, extra batteries, and a thermal scanner he borrowed from a friend. He didn't enter through the back wall. Instead, he arranged for a private after-hours access under the guise of filming a documentary. Money opened doors, even haunted ones. Inside, the prison was even more silent than before. Raymond had warned him, If you go into cell 12, don't stay long, and whatever you hardened answer. Daniel found block 3 quickly. The air here felt wrong, like every breath was borrowed. Cell 12 stood at the end of the hall. Unlike the other doors, which had rusted to a dull brown, this one was darker, almost black. The number 12 was barely visibly faded, like it didn't want to be remembered. He reached for the handle. Ice cold. He turned it slowly. The door creaked open. The flashlight flickered again. Inside, stone bed. Wall scratches, a deep stain in the corner, like old oiler blood. But no sign of Emmett. Daniel stepped in, camera rolling. The temperature dropped instantly. His thermal scanner pinged. Cell temperature, 3C. Outside, 20 to C. He scanned the walls. No movement, no heat signature. Then the whispering began. Faint, then louder, but not coming from outside. From within the cell. Daniel. His blood turned to ice. He hadn't given his name to anyone that night. The voice came again, closer. Daniel, you came back. He turned, light shaking. Still alone. Then the wall letters began forming in the dust. Slowly, like fingers were carving them from the other side. Stay. His camera glitched violently. He moved to leave, but the door slammed shut behind him. The light went out. Pitch black. Then another whisper. Not a voice. Breathing. Slow, wet. Like something struggling to exist. And then, in the darkness, eyes. To pale circles, hovering near the bed. Daniel backed against the door. His voice trembled. What do you want? The answer came not as words but as a scream. A deep, guttural, inhuman scream that filled the tiny space and rattled his bones. He covered his ears. The sound stopped. The door creaked open behind him. He didn't hesitate. He ran. Out of the cell, down the corridor, past the silent walls, back through the central rotunda, where for a heartbeat saw himself again. His double, standing in the same place, smiling this time, but not kindly, mockingly. Daniel didn't stop until he was outside. Later, back in his motel, he reviewed the footage. Cell 12's interior was darker than he remembered. The camera captured the whisper, but the voice wasn't his name. It was repeating something, over and over. I am emptied. He froze the image at the wall scratchings, enhanced. More words appeared behind the layers of dust and decay. I took him. I became him. And beneath that, you're next. Daniel doesn't talk about what happened in Cell 12 anymore. Not publicly. But sometimes when he plays the audio back, Alana swears he hears something new. Not a whisper. Not breathing. But laughing. And sometimes, just behind him, in the mirror, he swears he sees someone else wearing his face. Watching. Waiting. The wardens watch. Some ghosts are trapped. Others patrol. That's what Daniel read from an old journal he found in a used bookstore, tucked beside a cemetery near Germantown. The leather-bound cover had no title, just a faded stamp inside the front page. Property of ESP Warden's office. Inside, yellowed pages were filled with uneven handwriting, notes, inmate lists, discipline records, and warnings. The name at the top, Warden Elias Granger. Daniel had never heard of him, not on the tours, not in books, not even from Raymond Keener. But here, in this crumbling book, Granger's presence leaked through every word, and it wasn't kindness that lingered. Elias Granger served as warden of Eastern State from 1909 to 1923. Not much is publicly recorded about him, but according to the journal, he ruled with an iron fist and a cruel heart. Inmates feared him more than solitary. Guards refused to patrol with him after dark. Even his own staff began calling him the Lantern, because wherever he walked, he carried a heavy brass lantern. And wherever that lantern stopped, someone disappeared. Daniel flipped through the brittle pages. The 6th of February, Block 5. Another one tried to claw his way through the wall. Useless. No one leaves without paying. I kept the key. I watched the light die in his eyes. It was satisfying. Another page. The 19th of August. There's talk among the guards, whispers. They say I don't sleep. I don't. The prison breathes at night, and I listen. The last entry chilled Daniel the most. The 3rd of October. They tried to remove me. Said I was too harsh. Said I was losing control. Fools. You don't leave a fortress to sheep. I will remain. Even if my flesh rots, the halls will echo with my steps. The light will never go out. Daniel closed the journal and booked his return ticket to Eastern State that same night. This time, he brought help. Mia Travers was a paranormal researcher with a podcast called Dead Light Files. She was skeptical, but intrigued. After seeing Daniel's footage, especially the part from Cell 12, she agreed to join. This isn't just a haunting, she said. This is an imprint, a permanent scar. The prison isn't just holding ghosts, it's holding him. They entered through the main gate this time with permission, thanks to a fabricated documentary license. Midnight access. Just the two of them. Mia set up electromagnetic sensors along the central rotunda, infrared cameras in Block 5, and a sound dish aimed toward the upper tiers where the warden's office once stood. Daniel walked with the journal in hand, comparing notes with the layout. Mia pointed toward the second floor. Up there, that's where his lantern was last seen, right? Daniel nodded. By the north watchtower. The two climbed the winding iron staircase, their flashlights barely touching the darkness above. Dust swirled. Cold air wrapped around them. At the top, the corridor was narrow and quiet. Empty doorframes gaped like wounds. Most doors were gone broken or rotted through, but one remained. Heavy iron, painted black. A faint engraving was visible under the rust. Warden. Mia pulled out a thermal scope. It's colder here. Daniel reached for the door. It creaked open slowly. The office was still. Old desk, metal file cabinets, a shattered window looking out over the central rotunda, and in the corner something stood. Not a person, not a statue, a lantern, polished brass, untouched by time, no dust, no rust. It was burning. A blue flame flickered quietly behind the glass, casting a soft glow on the walls. Mia stepped back. That shouldn't be on. Daniel stared at it, frozen. It's him. She took out a voice recorder. We are in the warden's office. It's 12:47 a.m. We're witnessing an unexplained, active light source with no fuel or ignition. No wind. No heat detected. Daniel stepped forward slowly. Suddenly, the door slammed behind them. They both spun around. Darkness dropped like a curtain. The lantern flared, and footsteps echoed outside the room. Heavy, deliberate, boots, the sound of keys rattling. Mia whispered, "We're not alone." The footsteps grew louder, closer-ing the office. The flame inside the lantern pulsed in rhythm with the steps. Then a voice, low, grating, full of command. "Out of your cell." Daniel's breath caught. "Did you hear that?" Mia nodded, eyes wide. "It's coming from everywhere." The voice again. "Down, knees." The air grew colder. The desk drawer slid open on its own. Inside an old iron key. Long, blackened with age. It vibrated slightly. Mia reached for it, but her hand recoiled. "Burns cold," she hissed. Daniel took it instead. The moment he lifted it, the lantern's light surged then went out. Pitch black. Mia activated her night vision camera. Through the screen, she gasped. "Daniel, he's in the hallway." He looked over her shoulder. In the green-lit display, a tall figure stood just outside the door. Warden Granger, wearing a long, old-fashioned coat, broad-shouldered, hat low over his face, but this one burned red. The figure raised the lantern. The door creaked open again. Empty hallway, but the air was thick, like syrup. It resisted every movement. Mia whispered, "We have to go, now." They bolted down the stairs, lantern flickering back to life behind them. As they reached the rotunda, the EMF meters Mia placed began screeching. Lights surged. Shadows danced. The neighbor of the Mikuing from the catwalk. You don't run from justice. A beam of light swept across the rotunda. The warden's lantern. Moving slowly, hunting. Daniel grabbed Mia's arm and pulled her toward Block 5. We hide there. He used to patrol it the most. Isn't that the worst place to be? Exactly. He won't expect it. They ducked into one of the cells, barely enough room for two. The hallway outside glowed faintly as the red light approached. Closer, closer. The lantern paused just beyond the door. Mia held her breath. Then the light moved on. Silence. They waited 10 more minutes before stepping out. Everything was quiet again. The lantern in the warden's office, gone. The sensors, fried. The cameras, dead. All that remained was the key. Still in Daniel's pocket, cold as ice. Back at Mia's studio, they reviewed the audio. It was corrupted. Except for one clear moment, recorded as they reached Block 5. A voice, calm, male, distant, spoke clearly. The watch never ends. Daniel never returned to Eastern State after that night. Not physically, but in his dreams. He sees the rotunda, hears boots on stone, and always slow swing of a lantern casting blood-red light. He still has the key. Sometimes it vibrates in his drawer. Sometimes it whispers, "You owe me time." Whispers in solitary. They built solitary to break the soul. Eastern State's solitary confinement block, officially named Cell Block 14, was more than isolation. It was punishment beyond reason. A place where even the silence had weight. Where inmates were left alone for months in absolute darkness. No voices. No light. No sound but their own breathing. Some never came out. Others came out, changed. After the encounter with the warden's ghost, Daniel took weeks to recover. His hands still trembled when he handled the old key he'd taken from the warden's office. It hadn't stopped vibrating. Not once, like it was alive, or waiting. Mia had gone dark. No messages, no podcast updates. Her last voicemail was just static and a whisper that might have been her voice saying, "He's watching." Daniel didn't want to return, but the nightmares dragged him back. He kept waking to whispers, always the same. Solitary, solitary, solitary. And so he did what he feared most. He went back. This time, Daniel went alone. It was a cloudy night, with no moon. The air pressed down like a weighted blanket. Eastern State loomed before him, still and cold. Not just abandoned Dresendal, like the building itself knew him now. He walked through the courtyard under the broken arches, flashlight in one hand, the warden's key in the other. As he crossed into the southern wing, the whispers began. Not loud, but not from memory. They were real. "He's back. It's him. Don't let him open the door." Cell Block 14 wasn't listed on any map. Officially, it didn't exist anymore. Tourists weren't shown the way. Even Raymond Keener had admitted it was walled off years ago, for safety. But Daniel found it easily, because something wanted him too. Behind a broken maintenance tunnel, behind rusted grates and collapsed stone, a narrow corridor sloped downward. He followed it in silence. His flashlight began to dim again. He slapped it, but the beam remained weak. It didn't matter. A new light appeared ahead. Faint, blue, the same flicker as the warden's lantern, but colder. And waiting at the end of the corridor was a door. Heavy, steel, bolted shut, a faded 14 stenciled above it. Daniel reached into his pocket and took out the key. The moment it touched the lock, the metal groaned, and the whispers stopped. The door creaked open to reveal a hallway of cellsmo, square and silent. Each one a stone box with no window, no bed. Just a floor drain and an iron ring bolted to the wall. As Daniel stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind him. He didn't jump this time. He expected it. Instead, He pressed record on his camera and whispered, "Solitary block. Night 1. No going back." He walked slowly past each cell. Some had claw marks on the inside. Others had dried stains on the floor. Every few feet, a soft breeze blew against his skin, cold and sudden. No vents, no airflow. It was as if the cells exhaled. Then came the voices. Not whispers now. Clearer, closer. "Turn around." He spun. No one. Just shadows that twisted on the walls. Another voice, softer, trembling. "He never let us out. He made us listen to the screams." The walls never forgot. Daniel aimed his camera at the nearest cell. The door had been ripped off completely. On the back wall, etched deep into stone, nitrogen monoxide light, nitrogen monoxide end, nitrogen monoxide mercy. As he backed away, his foot hit something. A rusted chain. It was still fastened to the ring on the wall, but at the other end, a bone. Human. Clean, white, fresh. The flashlight flickered again and died. Daniel pulled out a backup. No power. Then, from inside one of the cells, he saw a faint glow, like a candle flickering behind the bars. He stepped closer. Cell 14-6, the one at the far end. The glow intensified. He peeked inside. A figure sat on the ground, thin, knees pulled to chest, wrapped in what looked like a tattered inmate uniform. Daniel couldn't see the face, only the lantern flickering beside the figure's feet. A voice rose from the cell, not threatening but broken. He said, "We were numbers, not names, but I remember mine. They tried to forget me, but I remember you." Daniel's voice cracked. "Me?" The figure turned slightly. Still no face, just darkness, but its voice hardened. "You opened the door." The lantern's light flared, and all the cells of them lit up at once. Blue, cold, filled with silhouettes. Dozens of them, all sitting, all chained, all staring straight ahead, and all of them whispering, "He watches. He punished. He punished us all. You brought his key. You brought him back." Daniel stepped back, heart hammering. No, it didn't mean to. The figure in 14-6 rose, 7 feet tall now, looming, and sudden lithe whispering stopped. Dead silence. The figure stepped through the bars as if they didn't exist, now face to face with Daniel. No eyes, just a hole, a void, an absence of being. And then it spoke not as a whisper, but as a command. "Return it." Daniel didn't move. "Return the key." The warden's key. He fumbled with it, pulled it out. The figure didn't reach for it, just stood there, waiting. He placed the key on the floor. The moment it touched the stone, everything changed. The lanterns went out. Every cell door slammed shut in unison. The air rushed upward, a massive inhale. And then, darkness. Daniel's camera flickered. On the screen, the solitary block was empty again. No figures, no chains. Only one thing remained in cell 14-6. A mirror, cracked, covered in dust. He stepped inside and wiped it clean. His reflection stared back, but it wasn't him. It was the warden, smiling. Daniel bolted, through the hallway, past the locked cells, back toward the steel door. It wouldn't open. He screamed, pounded on it. Then, footsteps, behind him. Slow, measured. "You opened the door." He turned. No one there. But his camera showed a shadow moving closer. Thin light, flickering, red. When Daniel woke, he was lying in the courtyard. No key, no camera, no lantern. The staff found him at dawn, curled up by the front gate. He couldn't speak for hours, just whispered. Solitary never ends. He never posted the footage, because it was gone. But sometimes when he walks by mirrors or dark glass, he sees something just behind him. A flicker of blue, and a voice, faint but clear. "You let him out." The blood-stained wall. There are places that remember pain. Not in the way a photograph does, but deeper, in the stone, in the air itself. Eastern State's Cell Block 4 is one of those places. It was never the largest block, nor the most notorious until the blood appeared. And it never left. Daniel hadn't been to the prison in over a month. He was trying to forget, trying to sleep, trying to unsee what he'd found in the solitary wing. But the nightmares had only gotten worse. He stopped recording them. The last one ended with him standing in Cell Block 4, alone, facing a wall smeared with blood. Words written in it to quickly, to violently, to read clearly. And a whisper. Not the warden this time. A woman. They made me disappear. He couldn't ignore it. So he returned again. This time, Daniel didn't bring cameras or gear. No batteries, no EMF meters. Just a flashlight, a notebook, and a map of the prison torn from the back of Raymond Keener's out-of-print guidebook. He found Cell Block 4 just past the collapsed chapel stairs. It was quiet, too quiet. The ceiling above had partially caved, casting strange angles of moonlight down the hall. The cells here were larger than those in solitary 2 bunks, narrow shelves, metal toilets. Daniel walked slowly, the floor beneath him crunching with old plaster and shattered tiles. Then his flashlight dimmed. He hadn't even entered a cell. The air turned bitter, and that smell returned adrenaline and rot. Blood. He turned down the hall and saw it. The wall. It was unmistakable. At the very end of Cell Block 4, where no camera had worked in years, there was a 6-foot-wide stain, deep red, dark brown at the edges, the shape of a massive hand, smeared downward, as if someone had tried to claw their way through solid stone. Daniel approached slowly, and then he saw something else. Writing. Beneath the smear, etched into the wall with something sharp. It wasn't a fight. It was a ritual. He blinked. What did that mean? He touched the stone. Still wet. He jerked his hand back. Impossible. The prison was sealed. Empty. No one had been here in weeks. Then the air shifted. Behind him a voice. Low. Female. You're not supposed to see this. Daniel turned quickly. A woman stood in the center of the hallway, wearing a 1930s prison uniform. Face pale, eyes hollow. She wasn't breathing. She wasn't blinking. She just stood there, staring. He stepped back, hand shaking. But she didn't move. She only whispered. They took me from my cell. I screamed. No one heard. I screamed until my mouth filled with blood. Daniel's voice trembled. Who took you? She tilted her head, and the bloodstain behind him began to drip. Tiny red rivulets down the wall, forming fresh trails on the cracked floor. Daniel looked up. There was no pipe, no water source, no reason. Yet the blood ran thick, slow, fresh. The woman took a step forward. Her eyes were still locked on his. They carved the symbol, right here. She pointed to her forehead, and Daniel saw it. A faint Mark III interlocking rings, scorched into her skin. The warden said it would cleanse the evil. He said I was the vessel. Daniel shook his head. No, that's not. They killed me. The hallway roared to life. Every cell door slammed shut on after another. Bang, bang, bang. The echo was deafening. Lights flickered above. The woman vanished, and the blood on the wall turned black. Daniel backed away, breath ragged, mind spinning. A ritual, a sacrifice. This wasn't just punishment. It was something older, deeper. He checked the nearest cell empty. The next scratches. A third words carved over and over into the wall. We were offerings. He looked back down the hallway. The bloodstain was gone. Not faded. Gone. As if it had never been there. Daniel fled. He didn't stop until he was outside, gasping, trembling. He made it back to his apartment by dawn, collapsed on the floor, and finally slept. When he awoke, hours later, there was something in his notebook. A page he hadn't written. Messy, scrawled, as if done in pain. A name, Clara Winslow, and beneath it, died 1932. No record of release, no death certificate. Daniel sat up. That name. He searched online, found a single newspaper clipping in a Philadelphia archive. Female inmate found dead under mysterious circumstances. Body unrecovered. Officials say the cell suffered a structural collapse. Name withheld. But on the edge of the article, handwritten, CW Cell Block 4. He returned again. He had to. It was raining when he entered the prison once more. He brought only one thing this time, a copy of the article. He walked straight to Cell Block 4. The bloodstain was back, and this time I had words, dripping in crimson, written across the entire wall. I remember, do you? Daniel felt the air grow colder again. Footsteps behind him. But this time, he didn't turn. He just said aloud, Clara. Silence. Then, thank you. The words echoed down the corridor, and the blood began to fade again. Not disappear, fade. Like it had been seen. Like it had finally been heard. He left the prison without incident, but something followed. At home, Daniel found his windows steamed up despite the air conditioning, and on the bathroom mirror, they took more than me. He wiped it away, but the message burned into his memory. That night, he dreamed of the warden again, but not in the rotunda. This time, Elias Granger stood in Cell Block 4, holding his lantern, staring at the bloodstain. A voice echoed at his own. You brought her back. She remembers now. Daniel tried to move, couldn't. Then the warden looked at him directly. And now she'll show you what I did. Daniel awoke screaming. His arms were cold, his shirt soaked in sweat, and his notebook was open on the floor. New writing, dozens of names, all female, all inmates, all marked with no record of release. He flipped through page after page. At the very end, Clara's name again, and a final message. You open the wound. The locked door opens. Daniel didn't remember falling asleep, but when he woke up, the notebook lay open on his chest. It was turned to a page he didn't recall writing. At the top, scrawled in frantic strokes, she opened it for you. Below that, a drawing, rough but clear. A door. Not just any door. Iron hinges, a circular window like a porthole. A strange set of symbols carved into its surface, 3 rings, interlocked with a jagged triangle in the center. And beneath it, behind this door, he waited. Behind this door, he still waits. Daniel's pulse quickened. He had seen that symbol before in Clara Winslow's forehead in the solitary wing, burned into her skin. He knew now that her death hadn't been punishment, it had been ritual. And whatever ritual was performed, it had left something behind. Something alive. He spent the next day combing through old blueprints of Eastern State Penitentiary, scanning digital archives, contacting preservationists and historical groups. No one had ever heard of such a door, until he cross-referenced old renovations. In 1929, Eastern State had constructed an underground chamber for storage and quarantine. The plans showed a sub-basement beneath Cell Block 4 sealed off during the 1950s. It was never reopened. No photos, no documentation after the warden's death. Just one line scribbled in red ink in the margins of an old structural report. Vault sealed per warden, e.g. do not re-enter. Daniel stood once again outside Cell Block 4, flashlight in hand. The prison groaned around him, walls breathing in slow agony. He took a deep breath and walked toward the end of the corridor. At the farthest cell, half hidden behind collapsed stone, was a narrow archway sealed by a thick wooden door, different from the others. This one had a handle made of black iron, and above the arch, etched faintly in stone, only the chosen return. He pushed the door. It didn't budge. He reached into his coat and pulled out the key, the warden's key, the one that had opened cell 12, the one that had vibrated in his pocket since the first night. He had tried to destroy it, burn it, bury it, drown it. It always came back. He placed it in the keyhole. It turned with a smooth, sickening click. The door swung open. Cold air hit his face, laced with mildew and something rotting. He descended slowly, each step echoing like a warning. The air thickened. His flashlight flickered but stayed on. Ahead, a hallway led to a large iron door. The door, from the drawing, the same circular window, the same symbols, only now, it pulsed faintly with blue light, like something behind it was breathing. He approached cautiously, notebook in one hand, the other trembling at his side. The door had no lock, no knob, but his fingers were drawn to the triangle at its center. Against his better judgment, he touched it. Pain stabbed into his skull like ice. His vision blurred. The world fell away. He was no longer in the basement. He stood in the warden's office. But it was wrong. The walls bled. The floor was wet with red water. The warden stood at the window, back turned, and Clara Winslow knelt at his feet, eyes hollow, mouth sewn shut. The warden turned slowly, holding the brass lantern. His face was a void. "You opened the wound," he said. "Now open the door." Daniel gasped and stumbled backward, and came to. He was lying on the floor in front of the iron door. His flashlight cracked beside him, still flickering. He stood, shaken. Thin a sound. From behind the door. Soft. A tap. Then another. Thin a voice. Faint, ragged, human. "Please open it." He stepped closer. "I've been alone so long." His hand lifted on its own, but before it could touch the door again, a scream. Behind him. He turned. Clara, standing at the bottom of the stairs, blood running from her stitched mouth, eyes wild. She shook her head slowly, and pointed back toward the surface. Then her voice filled his mind, not his ears. "He isn't trapped. He's waiting. If you open it, he's free." Daniel froze. The voice behind the door whispered again. "Don't listen to her. She's part of it. I'm innocent." Then another voice in Greer. "Liar, liar, vessel, flesh, key." The door shook. The iron groaned. Daniel backed away. The symbols glowed brighter. Suddenly, blood poured from the circular window. It ran down the metal in thick streams, pooling at Daniel's feet. He turned and ran. Up the stairs, past the cells, through cell block 4, back to the main hall. He didn't stop until he reached the central rotunda where the lantern once hung. It was lit again, swinging, back and forth, like a metronome counting down. That night, Daniel locked himself in his apartment. He placed the warden's key in a box and duct-taped it shut. He buried the notebook. He smashed his phone. He disconnected from everything. But the dreams still came. He dreams of the door, of the thing behind it. Sometimes it looks like him. Sometimes it speaks in Mia's voice. Sometimes Clara screams forever mute. He always wakes up before the door opens. Always. Until last night. Last night, it opened, and a hand reached through. Skinless, elongated, fingers like knives. It reached for his chest, and when he woke, there was a cut over his heart. Small, fresh, bleeding. Daniel knows now. The door is still locked, but not for long. Something in the prison wants out, and it's using him to do it. Every return, every camera, every whisper. It was never about finding truth. It was about preparing a keyhole. Later that week, a janitor at Eastern State reports a strange noise near cell block 4. When staff investigate, they find the wooden door ajar. The tunnel beyond is gone. Bricked up, seamless, as if it had never existed. But on the inside of the bricks, they find something new. Words scratched in blood. I opened it. Daniel hasn't been seen since. His apartment sits empty. Mail piling up. Lights left on. But in the footage left on his final hard drive, one clip stands out. Night vision. Staring at the iron door. A voice whispers one final time. What was sealed must now be fed. Then silence. And the last frame. The door. Opening. Slowly. Welcoming. Return of the lantern. The night air was thick with anticipation. The usual crowd had gathered outside Eastern State Penitentiary for the monthly ghost tour, unaware of what would soon unfold inside the prison's cold stone walls. For decades, the penitentiary had been a magnet for thrill seekers and paranormal enthusiasts alike. But no one expected the rusted door at the end of cell block for the door sealed shut, for nearly 70 years to open on its own. Not on a night like this. The tour group moved slowly through the shadowed corridors, led by Marianne, a seasoned guide who had heard every story, from the cruel Warden Granger to the whispers in solitary confinement. The group paused at cell block 4, near the sealed-off archway. Marianne's flashlight beam landed on the old wooden door. Behind this door, she told them, is a part of the prison no visitor has seen since the 50s. Sealed for safety, they say, locked away from the world. As she spoke, a sudden creak echoed through the hall. Heads turned. The heavy door, covered in rust and dust, slowly swung inward. A hollow silence fell over the group. No one moved. No one spoke. The air grew colder. From the darkness beyond the threshold, faint footsteps echoed, soft but deliberate. Something or someone was walking through. A shadow detached itself from the blackness. Tall, broad-shouldered, holding a lantern that flickered with a deep, unnatural red light. The tour guide gasped. The group froze. The figure stepped into the corridor. Not human. Not fully. Its eyes, or what should have been eyes, were empty pits. Its coat was tattered, hanging like a shroud. Its lantern's flame cast eerie shadows that writhed on the walls. The creature paused, looked directly at the crowd, and whispered, "Justice is eternal." Then it turned and vanished down the hall, leaving behind a cold, suffocating silence. Panic erupted. Visitors scrambled to leave. Marion yelled for calm, but her voice shook. Outside, the night seemed impossibly darker. Word spread quickly. The sealed door of one Daniel had opened with the warden's key had opened on its own, and whatever had walked out was still inside. Rumors swirled. Some said it was Warden Elias Granger, returned to punish those who disturbed his domain. Others whispered of a malevolent spirit bound to the prison by unspeakable rituals. But no one dared to go near the door again. Days passed. No one entered cell block 4. But those who worked at the penitentiary spoke in hushed tones. They heard footsteps echoing after hours, saw flickering red light through cracks in the walls, and somewhat amazed before Dorothy heard a voice. The lantern never dies. Curious, a small group of paranormal investigators arranged a private visit. They set up cameras, sensors, and audio recorders outside the sealed door. One by one, their equipment began to malfunction. Static filled the audio feeds. Cameras captured only darkness or bursts of flickering red light. The investigators recorded the faint sound of chains dragging across stone floors. And then, a sudden scream. When the police arrived, the investigators were gone. Only their equipment remained, still recording. The last footage showed a red lantern swinging slowly in a vast, empty hall, and a shadowy figure standing just beyond the light. No one has entered cell block for since, and the door remains slightly ajar, swaying as if breathing. At the edge of the prison, a lone man watches. Daniel, or what remains of him. His eyes hollow, his body thin. He clutches the warden's key tightly, whispering to himself. The watch continues, and somewhere deep inside Eastern State, the lantern burns, waiting. The screaming chamber. There are screams that never leave. At Eastern State Penitentiary, beneath the stone floors and rusted gates, lies a hidden Shimbara place so feared that even guards whispered its name only behind closed doors. They called it the Screaming Chamber. No visitor tours this section. No investigator dares enter, because those who have tried report hearing chains dragging in the darkness. Screams echoing off the walls, agonized, endless, desperate. And no one ever comes back. Daniel had avoided it. But after the door in cell block 4 opened, after the lantern appeared, after the whispers haunted every shadow knew the next step, he had to go deeper. The entrance was concealed beneath a broken floor grate in the old kitchen. It led down a narrow staircase, slick with mold and shadow. Daniel's flashlight barely pierced the darkness. Each step brought him closer to a cold he'd never felt before. At the bottom, a heavy iron door blocked the corridor. No markings, no windows, only the faintest echo of a voice from behind. He placed his palm against the cold metal. Whispers greeted him. "Come in. Don't leave. Stay forever." The door groaned open. Inside was a vast cell, smaller than a room, lined with chains bolted into every wall. Rust covered the iron fixtures. The floor was stained dark, the air thick with despair. Daniel's breath fogged his glasses. He moved cautiously. The silence was broken suddenly by a sharp clang, canes rattling. He spun. Nothing. But the temperature dropped, and then the screams began. Not distant, not muffled. Right beside him. Bone-chilling screams of agony. He covered his ears. They pierced through his mind. His knees buckled. A faint light flickered on the far wall. A lantern. Red flame burning steady. Daniel crawled toward it. Whispers grew louder. Names. Dates. Stories. The wall before him was covered in scratches. A message, desperate. "We suffer for the sins of the warden." He traced the words, then saw an opening behind a loose stone. He pushed it. The wall slid inward, revealing a hidden passage. Dark, deeper, full of shadows. Daniel hesitated, but the screams beckoned. He entered. The passage opened into a narrow tunnel. The air thickened with something old and hungry. A cold breeze carried the scent of decay. Chains scraped stone. Footsteps. At the end was a door, carved with the same symbols, rings and triangle. It pulsed with blue light. The lantern's flame flared behind him. The air shook. A voice whispered in his ear. "Do you hear them now? The screams. Not just echoes. Real. Alive. And closing in." Daniel backed away. The door slammed shut, trapping him. He fumbled for his flashlight. It died. Complete darkness. A cold hand gripped his wrist. The scream rose to a fever pitch. Then silence. He was found hours later outside the prison gates. Unconscious. No sign of injury. But his eyes empty. The screaming chamber remained sealed. But those who walked near claimed to hear the chains. And the screams. The disappearing guard, Security Officer Matthew Lane, was known for being level-headed. He didn't believe in ghosts, not in the lantern, not in Clara Winslow, not in the screaming chamber. His job was simple: make sure the abandoned Eastern State Penitentiary stayed undisturbed. He walked the halls alone at night, checked the gates, scanned the fences. But on May 14th, 2023, at exactly to 11 a.m., Officer Lane vanished. No alarms were triggered. No doors were opened. No cameras caught anyone entering or leaving. But his flashlight was found lying in the middle of cell block 8, still on, still warm. His walkie-talkie, found nearby, emitted nothing but harsh static. The prison's security tape, as usually airtight, flickered that night. 3 minutes of corrupted footage. But what little was recoverable showed something chilling. A flicker of red light passing across the far wall, and the faint silhouette of a man holding a lantern. The footage ends with the frame freezing on Officer Lane, standing completely still in front of the old execution yard door. And then has gone. Just gone. 2 days later, a search was launched. Teams of officers, dogs, and forensic investigators combed the grounds. They found no sign of struggle, no trace of blood, no prints. Only one thing left behind inside cell block 8. A thin line of black ash leading from the flashlight to the wall, and stopping. The warden's lantern was seen that night by the janitorial staff. They reported it floating down the corridor before flickering out behind a gate that hadn't opened in 50 years. Their official statement was quietly buried. The footage from their phone is mysteriously corrupted. Theories erupted online. Did the warden take him? Was Lane pulled into the screaming chamber? Did he open the sealed door beneath cell block 4? But there was no proof, no body, no motive. Just a name, just a flashlight, just static. Officer Lane's wife released a plea through the news. Matt wasn't the type to run. He loved his job, even joked about the ghosts. But he wouldn't leave like this. Something happened in that prison. Behind the scenes, the administration brought in a team of paranormal researchers. Unofficially, quietly. They set up motion sensors, IR cameras, EMF meters, and digital audio recorders throughout cell block 8, and waited. At 2:11 a.m. the following night, exactly 24 hours after Lane's disappearance, sensors went off. A blast of static came through every radio. Temperature in the corridor dropped by 11 degrees in under 3 seconds, and something whispered through the audio feeds. Not him. The wrong one. The next morning, all the cameras were wiped. Memory cards melted inside their housings. Only one device survived, an old reel-to-reel tape recorder placed in the corner of the block. On it, the sound of heavy boots walking slowly, a rattle of chains, a voice in mystically male saying, "I told him not to follow the light." Cell block 8 was locked indefinitely. Visitors are now told it's under renovation. But sometimes at night, locals say you can see a red flicker inside one of the windows, like a lantern, swaying, waiting, and the ash. It returned the next night, drawn in a circle. In the center, a single word written in black soot. Again, Matthew Lane's photo now hangs in the staff hallway, not as a memorial, but as a warning. Underneath it, someone taped a note. Don't walk alone, don't answer the whisper, and never ever follow the light. Return of the prisoner. Her name was Isabel Hart, and she had never believed in ghosts until she walked through the gates of Eastern State Penitentiary. A psychic by trade and clairvoyant since childhood, Isabel had made a career out of reading energies, contacting spirits, and conducting cleansings for clients across the East Coast. Most of it, she admitted, was theater, a show. But something about Eastern State was different. She hadn't been inside for more than 10 minutes when she collapsed. She was part of the closed paranormal event film for a cable show that never aired. During her first walk through the halls, she paused near cell block 3, just past the old mess hall. Her face paled, her hands shook. "I feel him," she whispered. "He's not angry. He's confused." She turned slowly toward one of the cells, 25. "No one ever let him out," she murmured. "He's still trying to finish something. He doesn't even know he's dead." Cameras rolled. Crew members leaned in. But then Isabel screamed. She dropped to her knees, eyes rolling back, and in a voice that wasn't her own, she said, "Number 514. Buried, not pardoned, still waiting, still cold." The lights flickered, and then silence. They pulled her out. She regained consciousness, pale and disoriented. The production was canceled, but Isabel stayed. She returned alone that night. She needed answers. Cell 25 was locked but rusted enough to break through. Inside, it was dusty, forgotten. The mattress was rotted away, and the walls were covered in deep scratches, hundreds, thousands, as if someone had clawed at the stone every night for years. Etched above the bed in trembling strokes. Not guilty. Isabel sat down on the floor, crossed her legs, closed her eyes, and waited. She didn't call the prisoner. She didn't summon anything. She simply listened. At first silence, then footsteps. Heavy, bare, dragging slightly. Chains. She opened her eyes. The cell was still empty, but the air had changed. Thicker, denser, charged. Her breath became visible, and the faint scent of iron filled the space. Then cold fingers brushed her cheek. She turned quickly and saw him. A man, thin, tall, barefoot, wearing a tattered prison uniform with the number 514 stitched across the chest. He didn't speak. He simply stared at her with deep, sunken eyes, and then pointed to the far wall. There Isabel saw something that hadn't been there moments ago. A blood stain, slowly forming. Not dripping, not fresh, but appearing from within the stone. She rose, walked to it. Words began to bleed through. "Tell them I didn't do it." She turned to him. "What didn't you do?" But he was already fading, mouth moving soundlessly. Then gone. She ran from the prison, and the next day, she filed a formal report to the Eastern State Historical Society. She claimed that prisoner 514, name unknown, had been wrongly accused, buried in the records, and was now trapped inside the walls. She begged them to look into it. They ignored her, until she brought proof. Weeks later, Isabel returned, at this time with a team of archivists and one skeptical journalist. They pulled prison records from 1912, and there, hidden in an old ledger with pages stuck together from mold and time, they found a name. James K. Monroe, inmate 514, convicted of arson and murder. But the final page was missing. No mention of trial, no execution, no release. The official record ended on the day he entered cell 25. They brought Isabel back to the cell. She stood silently for nearly 10 minutes. Then she whispered, "He wants them to know. He says he saved a child, that the fire wasn't his fault. He says the warden lied." She reached into the dirt beside the bed and pulled out a rusted metal tag. Stamped into it, 514 SAFE. Isabel's eyes filled with tears. He tried to save someone, but they blamed him, and he died alone, screaming. Suddenly, the door behind them slammed shut. The lights blew out, and a voice filled the airnet from Isabel, but from everywhere. "I never hurt her. I never meant to die here." The journalist fled. The archivists cried, and Isabel smiled through her tears. "He's not angry anymore," she whispered. "He just needed to be heard." After that day, strange things stopped happening near cell 25. No more cold spots. No more flickering lights. Visitors reported feeling at peace, as if a weight had been lifted. But something still lingers in the halls. Isabel says James isn't gone, just free to roam. Sometimes, late at night, guards still see a barefoot man walking the cell blocks. He doesn't speak, just nods, and fades away. Isabel left the paranormal world shortly after, but she sent a letter to the prison board before she disappeared from public life. It read, "You built walls to contain violence, but in your silence, you also buried truth." James Monroe was not a monster, and now, at last, he knows someone believes him. In the years since, cell 25 has been sealed. A plaque now hangs on the outside. James K. Monroe, inmate 514. May truth find the forgotten. And still, the stories come. About red lanterns, whispers, screams, chains. But some at a mess, there's another story. Of a man who walks barefoot through the halls, gently placing his hand on the shoulders of the living. A silent thank you, before vanishing once again into the dark. The phantom lineup. Eastern State Penitentiary was unusually warm that spring afternoon. It was the first Sunday of the month, and the prison was crowded with tourists. Some came for the architecture, others for the ghost stories. By 3 p.m., a large group had gathered near the central yard, just beyond cell block 2. The sun shone directly overhead, casting sharp, clean shadows across the cracked concrete. That's when a boy no older than 12 pointed toward the long corridor leading to the old yard gates, and said, "Why are they still wearing those old clothes?" The tour guide turned, and saw them. A line of men, silent, uniformed in faded gray, heads bowed, chained at the ankles. They shuffled single file across the yard, toward the south gate. No sound, no interaction, just a grim, deliberate march. At first, no one spoke. Some believed it was a historical reenactment, but the guide Korik knew better. There were no actors scheduled, no props, no permission for anyone to walk that close to the outer wall. He opened his mouth to call out, but the line of men passed into the sunlight and vanished, not all at once, one by one, like sand dissolving in the air. The last figure, taller than the rest, paused before fading, and turned, a face scarred beyond recognition, one eye missing, and a red glow burning in the empty socket. Then gone. Gasps rippled through the group. Phones were raised but nothing was captured. Some claimed their cameras froze, others that their footage was replaced with white static. But nearly every person present remembered the same detail. There were 13 prisoners. Later that evening, security reviewed footage from Yard Cam 3. It was mostly uneventful until 3:03 p.m. The screen rippled, the image distorted. Then figures, 13 of them, barely visible, blurred, but there. The footage didn't last long. Exactly 13 seconds, then black. When they checked the camera, they found it melted from the incidental sign of overload or short circuit. The footage was stored and quietly labeled, Phantom Lineup Archive Only, Do Not Publish. Researchers scrambled to understand. One archivist, Delia Barnes, found a curious record in the 1930 for punishment logs. A group of 13 men had once been marched to the southern yard for execution. But something went wrong. According to Warden Granger's own notes, the ritual required silence. They broke it. The punishment was incomplete. They walk until the silence returns. Delia read that line aloud 3 times. She couldn't understand it. What ritual? What silence? And why did no official records mention an execution that day? No death certificates, no burial reports, no official logs, just a footnote, marked, not erased. She printed copies of the 13 names. Only 3 had mugshots. All 3 faces were disfigured, blurred, like the photos had aged prematurely. And in each image a faint outline of chains around the neck, not the wrists. Execution by hanging, but unofficial. Delia interviewed 3 witnesses from the tourist group. Each gave eerily similar accounts. The men did not look at them. Their steps were synchronized, but heavy, and one of the Malways, the last in line, looked back, and the last one whispered, "We were chosen." No one knows what they were chosen for. But since that day, the line has been seen again. April 2nd, 2024. A drone filming a documentary from above the penitentiary caught strange shadows on the ground. 13 figures. No bodies, no heat signatures. Just outlines, moving in sync, then gone. June 13th. A visitor in the rotunda claimed to see a reflection of the yard from the wrong angle. She saw the line, but in reverse, walking backward, as if undoing something. July 1st. A night guard walking near cell block to heard metal scraping. He followed it and found 13 footprints, wet and fresh, leading from the rotunda to the yard gate, and in the concrete wall, scratched deep. We march until forgiven. Nobody knows who the prisoners were. Murderers, innocents, sacrifices. Theories range from mass punishment for a failed escape to a cult execution conducted by the warden himself. But one fact remains. The number 13 keeps appearing. 13 cells sealed for no known reason. 13 names struck from official records. 13 lanterns discovered buried beneath the chapel. And no 13 prisoners marching eternally across the yard. Delia returned one last time to the yard. Alone. She stood at the south gate just before sunset and waited. At 3:03 p.m., a wind swept through the yard. Dust lifted from the cracks in the stone, and a sound of low chain drag rolled across the field. Then footsteps, The line appeared, slower now, as if tired. Each face she saw was clearer, real, pained. But the last man, he stopped before fading. He looked at Delia, and for the first time, someone spoke clearly. We burned for him, but the warden never paid. Then the line vanished, and the yard fell silent. Delia left Eastern State that evening. She never returned, but she mailed one final envelope to the prison archives. Inside, a sketch of the lineup, a list of the 13 names, and a final note. They were sacrificed to something older, and until the warden is found they will keep marching. Since then, staff avoid the yard at 3 p.m. sharp, and tourists report a sudden heaviness in the air. Some feel watched, others hear shuffling feet, and one boy claims someone tried to grab his hand. When asked who, he said, "The sad man at the end of the line." Seance gone wrong. The air was thick with incense and anticipation as 5 people gathered inside a small, dimly lit room at Eastern State Penitentiary. This was not part of the official tour. This was something else. Isabel Hart had been invited back, not as a visitor, not as a psychic consultant, but as a medium, to conduct a seance deep inside the prison's forgotten chapel. The group sat in a circle on the cold stone floor. Candles flickered, casting grotesque shadows on the cracked walls. The heavy oak door creaked shut behind them, sealing off the outside world. Their goal was simple: contact the spirits trapped inside Eastern State. Isabel placed her hands gently on a small wooden table at the center. The others joined hands. They began by calling names from the prison record shows whose deaths had been lost to time. Whispers filled the air, faint, elusive. The temperature dropped. Then the candles sputtered and went out. Darkness swallowed the room. A voice, harsh, guttural, broke the silence. "Get out!" Isabel's eyes snapped open. The others gasped. One woman screamed. Scratches appeared on the wall's deep gouges that hadn't been there before. The sound was like nails dragging slowly across wood and stone. "Get out! This place is cursed!" The voice echoed, louder now, as if coming from every corner. The group tried to pull away, but their hands seemed frozen, locked in place. The scratches continued to grow, lines turning into shapes, symbols, warnings. Suddenly, the floor beneath them trembled. A gust of icy wind swept through the room. Candles reignited, but the flames burned blue and green, unnatural. Isabel tried to speak, to calm the spirits, but her voice was drowned by a cacophony of screams, a chorus of voices crying out in pain and rage. One by one, the participants felt invisible fingers clawing at their skin. Cold, sharp, relentless. Panic set in. The table rocked violently. The candles flared, then blew out again. The room plunged into darkness once more. When the lights returned, Isabel was alone. The others had vanished. Frantic, she searched the chapel, calling their names. Only silence answered. She noticed fresh scratches on the floor leading toward the sealed basement door, the door that no one dared open. Isabel followed the marks down the damp stairs. The temperature dropped below freezing. A dark presence awaited. At the bottom, the walls were covered with symbols. Ancient, menacing. A warning: leave this place or become part of it. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the darkness. The air thickened, and the door slammed shut behind her. Hours later, the search party found Isabel unconscious on the chapel floor. No sign of the others. Since that night, strange occurrences intensified. Visitors hear whispers pleading for help near the chapel. Faint screams pierce the silence at odd hours, and new scratches appear, fresh, urgent, desperate. The penitentiary authorities sealed the chapel indefinitely. No one is allowed inside. But the story persists, a warning to those who seek to disturb what should remain buried. The final cell. The Eastern State Penitentiary was no stranger to explorers, thrill seekers, and ghost hunters. but few dared to venture as far as the final cell, oldest part of the prison, hidden beneath layers of decay and forgotten history. Daniel, the urban explorer who had first discovered the mysterious door in cell block 4, felt the weight of the prison's past heavy on his shoulders as he approached the entrance to the oldest wing. The air grew colder with each step. The walls seemed to close in. The door was ancient, carved from black iron, etched with symbols worn smooth by time. A small, cracked mirror hung beside it, an odd relic in a place where reflection was a luxury long lost. Daniel paused, studying the mirror. It was cracked but still reflective, and as he looked into it, he saw something more than his own face. Behind him, a shadow, a figure with hollow eyes and a sorrowful expression. He spun around. No one, only the cold stone walls. The door creaked open. Inside was a single cell, bare, silent. On the wall, a name was carved deep into the stone. Elias Granger, the warden himself. The stories had spoken of him. A cruel man who ruled with iron fists and cold judgment, punishing prisoners even in death. Daniel stepped inside. His flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows. The mirror on the opposite wall caught the light. He approached it cautiously. His reflection stared back alongside another face. The warden's face, pale, twisted in regret. Suddenly, the mirror fogged. Words appeared, scratched into the glass. Justice is a mirror, what you see is what you give. A cold wind swept through the cell. Daniel heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. Behind the door, the warden was watching. He remembered the Taliste lantern, the punishment, the eternal watch. Was this his prison now? The mirror began to crack. From the fissures, a whisper rose. Redemption or revenge? Choose your path. Daniel's reflection smiled, then twisted into a grimace. He felt a pull like the mirror was drawing him in. He resisted. He stepped back. The mirror shattered. Fragments fell to the floor, each reflecting a different nightmare. The prisoners lost to time. The screaming chamber's cries. The phantom lineup's march. Daniel knew the prison held many secrets, but in that final cell, he saw the truth reflect Tedpine, regret, and the restless spirits trapped by injustice. He left the cell, closing the door behind him. Outside, the morning sun began to rise. Eastern State seemed less menacing in the light, but Daniel knew the prison's ghosts would remain, watching, waiting, reflected in every shadow.